As a student in a classroom setting, each student should be respectful of the other students around them and the other students in the class as a whole. One of the ways that students can be respectful of those around them is by making sure not to be a distraction, to have as few distractions as possible in the classroom. And one of the biggest distractions that I think I've noticed in a classroom is the use of electronic devices, mainly cell phones. I've seen them come into the class and they have their cell phones, and they can be a huge distraction. One of the ways that cell phones can be a distraction is if they ring. Obviously, if there's an audible ring, or if you receive a text message and that text message can be heard throughout the classroom, that's going to be disruptive and it's going to be a distraction. Your cell phone rings or you receive a text that makes a noise. Everybody, as small as the classrooms are, everybody in the class is going to be able to hear it. And so you don't want your cell phone to ring in class or to make a notification sound. You say, well, what if I just put it on vibrate? Well, they can still be a distraction even on vibrate. For example, you're in class, your phone doesn't make a noise, but you feel it vibrate in your pocket. Whether you receive a call or whether you receive a text message, you feel the phone vibrating. And so you pull the phone out, you look at your cell phone, bam. Now, you may not have disrupted the entire class, but the people sitting all around you see you pulling out your phone and looking at it, and that is a distraction to them. And so it's really best not even to just put it on vibrate, but to power down all electronic devices. This is the best way to cut down on distractions and disruptions in the classroom. Now, there are exceptions to this rule. Some of the exceptions are if it's a medical emergency, you may be exempt from following the rule. Another exception, not only medical emergencies, but also maybe your work needs to get in touch with you. Maybe you're on call, or for some other reason, your employer or your place of employment needs to get in touch with you. That could be an exception as well. Also, if you are disabled, you say, well, how will I know if I meet the qualifications for being disabled? If you meet the qualifications under the Americans with Disabilities Act, then you may be an exception to this rule. But here's what we ask. If it's a medical emergency, or if your employer needs to get in touch with you, or if you are disabled and you're an approved disabled person, approved meaning you qualify under the Americans with Disabilities Act, before class even starts, go to the professor, go to the instructor and say, hey, look, my place of employment may call. I need to be able to get in. I need them to be able to get in touch with me if they need me. I've got my phone on vibrate. Would that be okay if I left my phone on vibrate? Or if there's a medical emergency, hey, my little brother's at home. I may have to take him to the hospital if he can't get his breath. He's coughing a lot. We've given him breathing treatments, whatever the case may be. Just go to the instructor and say, hey, this is the case. Would it be okay if I just kept my phone on vibrate? That way, if somebody needs me, they can get in touch with me. And so that's the best way to handle that. If you feel like you are an exception to this rule of powering off the devices once you enter the classroom setting, make sure you communicate that effectively with your instructor before the class begins, and that will avoid any complications, and that will avoid any penalties from violating these rules, which leads me to the last portion of this. There are penalties for violating this. If you come in and you are a disruption to the class because you have not followed this rule of turning off your electronic device, then you could have to pay some of the penalties. The penalties could include maybe just a verbal warning. I know when I was in class, every time I got a verbal warning in front of the entire class, it was always embarrassing. So for me, that would have been enough. I wouldn't have ever done it again. But some people don't learn that quick. A verbal warning is not good enough for them. And so sometimes you may be asked to leave the class. It'll go a step beyond that verbal warning. You might be asked to leave the class. Sometimes it may result in a loss of points on an assignment because you refuse to comply with this rule that we have in the class. Or it could even result in you receiving a 0 on an assignment. And so please, please, please don't have to pay a penalty just simply because you wanted to buck the system and not turn off an electronic device. These are rules that are put in place for a reason. You're paying good money for your education. Others around you are too. We don't want to be a distraction. So, thank you. Thank you for listening.